This is BS. This is BS. Why are we here? I am going to call corporate.
Who the hell gave this guy a video camera? Welcome, I guess, into another edition of BSing with Big Nate. Good luck.
Mark C. Daniel, Signs of Life here on another edition of BSing with Big Nate. This is one, I don't know, this track to me was like a kick in the teeth, just old school ballsy rock and roll. And so naturally, we're going to get started. I am joined by Mark himself. Mark, hello.
Hello, Big Nate, and hello, everybody out there.
So I want to talk about your sound, man, because there's not really, to me, the 70s, early 80s are like that pinnacle of rock and roll. And for a while, it seemed like the Darkness were kind of carrying the torch, but now we're seeing a resurgence of kind of that old school rock and roll sound. So, what are your biggest influences?
Well, I love the '90s. I'm definitely a '90s kid, and I love everything about the early '90s from like 1990 to about maybe 95, 96. I love that, and classic rock is definitely in my blood. Love the blues, love jazz too. So I mean, it really kind of depends on where my head is because I'm constantly listening to music and writing and demoing and recording too. So I think that my sound, or I should say what I've put out so far, is definitely a lot more classic rock inspired. So I'm really kind of pulling a lot more from the 70s kind of stuff there.
Now, your process kind of has an interest. I mean, first of all, your background is stellar. You went to Berkeley, which is no small achievement.
Thanks.
But also, it seems like most of these are kind of ideations that you have, and then you work with other musicians to kind of put everything out under that Mark C. Daniel name. What is, if you can give me some insight, because mine's mostly speculation, onto what your writing process is like?
It's a great question because the moment I think I kind of have the formula down of how to proceed forward with new songs and new ideas is the moment I realize that how I did it before doesn't work for the future. So I try to not think about it at all, and then just demo and just write, and I'm in that process right now. In fact, I'm like up to my neck in brand new stuff right now because I'm starting to record new material on the 25th of this month. So right now it's just I'm still rewriting a couple of things, and it'll probably be somewhat final, if you want to call it that, like when it hits the tape, if you will, when it gets recorded. But even then, songs take on another life when they're performed live. And I try to keep the songs alive by changing it up a little bit and keeping it interesting and also living and breathing as its own sort of art.
Now, so, and you mentioned something there that granted, I'm very amusically inclined from a performing standpoint. Music is kind of the spice of life, and it was something that I always wished I could be better at, but I would always get frustrated because I put too much pressure on it. I did that kind of the same with radios. Like initially when starting stuff, I would script everything, and it just sounded so forced and unnatural. And then I found that like there's much more comfort, but I'm also much more prolific in kind of just not putting too much pressure on it, going with the flow. And do you find that to be kind of the same for you?
Absolutely. I think that's probably when things are at their best, when I'm not totally going crazy, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I've had a number of conversations with Mickey Curry in particular, who's the drummer on Signs of Life, and I'm recording with him at the end of the month. And he's also the drummer for Bryan Adams, Hall & Oates, Mick Jagger. I mean, he's worked with like serious people. Doesn't get much bigger than that. And it's amazing to find out how their process works, because I realized that I might actually overdevelop a number of things before I even hit the studio. So I try to go about it and trying to keep things a little bit loose and a little more loose once the melody and the song's kind of there. Just bring it to the folks I work with and try to get their input in on it too. So I think, like you said, it's the harder we squeeze, we want to hang on to it, the more it slips through our fingers. So it's better to kind of keep that secure and loving grip. I'll call it that.
Now, your work, you mentioned you're kind of entering the studio on the 25th. Do you have a timeline on upcoming releases? Because I mean, I'm excited. I'm at a point where I'm kind of clamoring for more.
Cool.
Signs of Life hooked me, so I need to know.
You're really awesome for saying that, man. I really appreciate that. I had a lot of tracks left over from 2019 that were going to be released in 2020. And what I basically did last year is that I was Well, okay. So some of the stuff was already written. The other stuff was kind of sort of written. So the stuff that was kind of sort of written, I finished writing that and recording all of that. So there's going to be stuff coming out in the beginning of 2022, which is basically stuff that I did in 2019 and 2020. So it could be a single or it could be an EP. I'm going to see how that stacks together. Sometimes singles do pretty well because it's people's maybe attention span. I don't want to kind of take over people's minds for too long. I'll give them something they like and hopefully they come back. I like to think of it that way. And so it might be an EP or a few singles at the beginning of next year. And then the stuff I'm doing right now, I really don't know. I'm going to kind of romance this stuff, but I love deadlines. I love them because it allows me to really just make a decision on how to get certain things done. How many guitars need to get done, the vocals get done, and then, happily ever after kind of go on and do the next thing. So I'm hoping that the stuff I'm starting at the end of October is going to have some presence somewhere in 2022.
So another one I've got to ask, and I kind of, you pinpointed something there that kind of fascinates me, is that, you had stuff that was slated for release 2019 and then 2020, and it kind of just sits in the bank. Now, how much, because you're given that, it's just kind of sitting there in your hands, how much reconsideration do you have through all of that? Like, does that keep you up at night?
Oh, dude, you are so right on with that, my friend. It does. It totally wakes me up in the morning, like at 3 a.m. I get up early. I love like long distance running. It keeps my head kind of in a reasonable place. Instead of having late nights, I get up early. So, but it's especially of lately in the past year, it's been like I get up like at 3 and then I'm like up all day. I got up at 4 this morning. I was supposed to get up at 5. But I got up at 4 and it's like, hey man, got to get on with it. Got to do this. So there was a lot of reconsideration and consideration of how to approach the stuff that was 2019 and 2020 and this stuff. And I'm kind of getting out of this phase right now where I'm actually learning a bit more about myself even in this process. And I'm thankful for it too. But, growth comes with growing pains. And there's been plenty of that. Plus this pandemic, and like yourself and like everyone else out there, the pandemic has allowed us time, and time and reflection could be a beautiful thing if there's a cutoff point. But other than that, it's going to be basically Van Gogh self-portrait, cutting our ears off because we're going crazy. So I'm managing my mind like I'm sure you are and everybody else out there to make sure we don't cross over into some dangerous territory in our heads.
I mean, that's something that's really fascinating. It was kind of a running trend early on because I started the BS with Big Nate series actually I think it was like the second week of like the pandemic really kind of taking hold here in the States. And I've been trucking along with it ever since. But to me, it's all about finding silver linings. And that has, in my opinion, been the biggest silver lining about all of this is I feel like, and it could just be in my personal life or, the confines of work, but there's less pressure, more reflection, and more consideration. And I think it ultimately is, from an adaptability standpoint, we've kind of all gotten better. Of course, there are all the negatives of this pandemic and just kind of having that silver lining, I think, in my perspective, makes it a whole lot more manageable. You did also mention, kind of trying to figure out whether it was going to be singles or a full-on EP. Something I've noticed that a lot of bands have been doing, and this is probably very similar to what you're mulling over, is the single by single release. And what I'm dying to see someone do, because I'm a big fan of, with the holidays coming up, of advent calendars. I also like the 13 days of Halloween. I'm a big fan of countdowns. So I think a monthly release, like you have 12 singles, monthly release, the end of the year, you get the whole damn album.
Dude, that's awesome. That's a great idea.
Well, I will let you have that. There is a lot to look forward to. I thank you so much for joining me. Signs of Life, man. It is killing it. Everyone go check out the rest of Mark C. Daniels' work. He's on Spotify and all over the place. And there's a lot of quality material there that I think you're all going to love. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so very much.